This is Ric Peri, AEA's man in Washington, the ruler of the puzzle palaces and the interface thereof between AEA and the rest of the world. Rick, how bad is Washington getting, buddy?
Oh, it is loony. But having said that, it's a relative thing.
Okay.
You know, I've been in Washington for almost 30 years, and the politics of Washington continue to, you know, be the topic of late night TV. But
not in a good way.
Not in a good way, and it doesn't really matter which tie you wear. But what's interesting is that from the regulatory perspective, everybody is so involved in the politics of Washington that in a lot of ways the regulators are just being able to do their job.
No kidding.
Which is really refreshing.
Well, there you go.
You know.
So now's the time, huh?
Well, we're getting some long overdue things coming through the pipeline.
My, okay.
So it's going to be a very, very busy fall and 2022.
Yep.
It's been a really quiet 20 and 21 right so far.
Gee, I wonder why.
Well,
yeah.
Interestingly enough, that it's you know, being in Washington, you know, Washington, the city of Washington has been arguably shut down for the better part of about 15 out of the last 18 months.
Yeah.
But when you look at the authorities, the agencies, they're such a diverse group, and they've been working a mixture of on-site and remote already, so that what you really saw was simply those that did go in joining those that had been working remote for a long time.
Okay.
The guys, the folks that we work with, guys and gals, the folks we work with stretch from Hawaii to DC, from Florida to Montana and Washington. And so it really, when we did the government lockdown a year ago March, the single, I joke about this, the single worst part of the lockdown was that somebody figured out I needed 12 minutes between meetings instead of 12 hours.
Eek.
And your Zoom calendar, your Teams calendar,
tell me about
your GoToMeeting calendars, they just blossomed. But the end result is that projects that had been originally scheduled for 12, 18, 24 months, because of that, are now being compressed and being resolved in a very timely manner. So from that perspective, it's not all bad.
Okay, we'll take that. What are the official Ric Peri targets for the remainder of 2021? What do you think is high on your hit list as being needed by the AEA community to go forth and multiply?
Well,
I want to start with the little questions.
Needed, or what am I watching? Because we've got some things coming in the pipeline that are significant for the membership. SMS being probably the heavy hitter right now. Europe, the Commission has already signed the requirements, the decision on SMS for maintenance and manufacturing. We're just waiting for the translations and the publication of it. And we expect that literally anytime this quarter.
Wow.
Okay? And we know that's coming. The good news is that of the world implementation of SMS, we actually like the European approach the best of all of them.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it's a much cleaner approach to incorporating the management system for safety along with your management system for quality, with your management system for business, your management system for personnel.
Okay.
And so recognizing that the management system is core, the objectives are the variables. So in some cases, the objective is quality. Sometimes it's safety. Sometimes it's profitability. But the core management system is the same. Europe has recognized that. And as a result, EASA's, at least the draft that I saw, their approach to it is bar none one of the strongest. Having said that, we know that internal to the FAA, so as we,
of course, we're interrupted by Jeff.
Of course, yeah. Thanks, Jeff. So
you know who your friends are.
So as you look at the FAA, they're working behind the scenes. So we know that we have SMS under Part 5 for air carriers, 121 air carriers.
Okay.
And that was mandated by Congress. But when the Congress mandated that, we had been working for a couple of years in rulemaking committee to put SMS onto all certificates.
Really? Okay.
So repair stations 145, schools 147.
The whole gamut.
The whole gamut.
Okay.
If you had a certificate, it was expected that you had SMS. When Congress mandated SMS for air carriers, the FAA withdrew that advance notice of proposed rulemaking
Okay.
so they could focus on 121. Fast forward 10 years now. And
That's the silent auction that everybody can hear, by the way.
yes. And so we're basically bringing it back on.
After this, we're both beating up Jeff Hill?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
So Jeff, you send me down there and then you, but so you look at the SMS, well, so we know the FAA is coming out with SMS for manufacturing, Part 21, and for 145 repair stations.
All right.
We believe they're also doing 135 and a few other things in there. Not too worried about 135.
Okay.
But in the case of the 145 and in manufacturing, we're watching those very closely.
I can imagine.
Where there is an industry standard for the implementation of SMS in maintenance and manufacturing. It's called SM001.
All right.
And it's an AIA SAE specification. And we're in the process of doing Rev 1 to it. I chair the maintenance subsection, but it also has a scalability subsection that's looking at that as well. And so we've got a number of elements in there. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. It is fundamentally in line with everything else. It's just a method of compliance. For AEA member shops or AEA member manufacturers, we already offer them an SMS tool.
Okay.
And we have for almost 10 years now, since Canada had mandated it. And so for the AEA member companies, we have the tools to implement your SMS as a function of your membership.
Okay.
It's included. There's no additional cost. There's nothing to it. So it's straightforward.
I like that.
So that's a big one we're watching.
Okay.
The other one we're watching is Mosaic.
Okay.
So if
Man, talk about the rumor mill and that puppy.
well, if you go back, 3 years to Oshkosh?
Yeah.
When the administrator threw that out there real quick, just kind of slipped it in?
Yeah, and then of course some of Jack Pelton's quotes thereafter.
Oh, of course.
Yes, that certainly created even more buzz.
Well,
Thanks, Jack.
so the FAA had the framework for Mosaic going through rulemaking.
Okay.
So they had a mechanism, they had a tool. And then Congress mandated some UAS requirements. The ability to certify UAS, appropriate certification, operations, things like that. So here you have certification that has a known rulemaking tool in the pipeline that is focused on principally experimental light sport and class 1-2 legacy airplanes.
We've been waiting for manna from heaven for decades.
Right. And so you have this tool, and now you have this congressional mandate that says, oh, by the way, you need to address drones.
Thank you very much.
So Mosaic gets hijacked, and it is in fact this mega rulemaking coming out that will touch everything from what was promised with experimental aircraft, all the way through legacy, all the way through Class 1 and 2 legacy airplanes plus LSA, and oh, by the way, it'll have a whole section on AAM and new airplanes.
And it's not going to stop there, is it?
I don't know. The savior, if you will, everybody gets upset because rulemaking takes so long. And I tell people that, the reason that avionics and avionics technicians fight very hard to stay outside of the bureaucracy of the FAA, okay, is that the bureaucracy requires 5 to 7 years to produce a standard.
Okay.
Industry can produce a standard, a new standard, in 18 months, and a revised standard in as few as 6. So when we talk about technology, we can implement technology exponentially faster when it's through consensus standards and out of the AC rulemaking environment. And so you have performance-based rules. They come around, they feed us through consensus standards on how to comply, and it drives it all through together. So it's a good thing. The nice thing is, and this is the reason that Aircraft Cert is kind of hijacked Mosaic in the process, is they don't have 5 years to do a whole new rulemaking, so they leverage the one they have.
The scary part is the sport aviation experimental community are being led to expect, unfortunately by people who don't know any better, to hear about this at Oshkosh this year.
Very likely. I would not be surprised if it was presented that it's there.
Oh, I know, we expect a presentation, but they're expecting this to be a done deal, and that's not happening.
Well, first of all, it's not a done deal.
Yeah.
First, so what we will have, and it is required to be a proposal by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I doubt seriously it will be out for comment before Oshkosh. So I expect that they will probably talk around it. But because it is in fact
situation normal.
Well, but because it's internal to rulemaking, they cannot discuss it.
Okay.
It's under ex parte. They can't discuss the content.
I understand the rules.
So I fully expect that they're going to say it's there. They may talk about what aircraft may be affected by it. They'll generally talk about it. The real key to this is to follow avionics news in our case, Aero News in your case in the industry, the trade publications and everything else, because when this hits the street, we will probably have 60 to 90 days to comment. And I encourage everybody,
time to get serious,
from the experimental community, through the light sport community, through the legacy aircraft community, through the drone community, through the AAM VTOL community.
Yep.
I encourage everybody to make those comments, whether they only look at their section of the rule, because it's going to be an ugly rule.
Yeah.
It will be one of the biggest rules you've seen come out in a while. When it comes out, focus on it, but submit your comments, submit your questions. If something doesn't make sense, ask the question.
The industry has been waiting piece to piece, reg to reg, proposal by proposal. Isn't there a more fluid way to do things? It just seems like so much gets held up in anticipation of something that may not happen for a year or 2 or 3, that there has to be some way to bridge the gap.
Well, and that's what the agency has been moving towards. If you look back a few years when we did the Part 23 rewrite, when you look at what was physically done, and there's a lot of discussion and hype and everything else that went with it. And there's a lot of, you know, late night TV jokes, right?
Yeah.
But what truly happened was we looked at Part 23 and we separated the prescriptive language from the performance-based language, okay? And what that did was, so in order to deviate from the regulation, the FAA has to do rulemaking. Now they can do it as a special condition, put it out for public comment, they can do a number of things like that, but it is rulemaking. It has to go public notice, Federal Register. But when you go to performance-based rules, thou shalt be safe. And then you have a method of compliance to being safe, okay? Then it's easy to deviate. So when you look at things like the fundamental weight of light sport aircraft, that's really not easily deviated from. That's a hard standard, because above that you're expected to go Part 23 or primary category, and below that is light sport. So it's really hard when you have like that to deviate. But if you look at 23 now, the old 23 had anything under 6,000 pounds, anything above 12,000 pounds, 12 to 19 was commuter category. So you had very specific. The new rule doesn't have those weights in it. It has the performance. What does the airplane do? I have 2 seats, I have a stall speed of this, I have a landing speed of this. And so that gives you the performance that allows industry to recommend things, to identify things, and to be able to bring new technology in without rule change. In the rotorcraft community, there's a kind of a consolidated rotorcraft regulation that's going final right now. And one of the things that it's curing, the old regulation said it must have incandescent light bulbs. And so this whole generation of LED required special conditions to get through.
Ridiculous.
And so they have been working very hard in implementing performance-based rules so that they are not the impediment to modernization.
Okay. Interesting. One of the things I wanted to bring up, and Mike and I talked about this yesterday, Mike Adamson, of course, our president of AEA, and pretty interesting guy in his own right. But we talked a little bit about where the next generation of technicians are coming from. And what do we do to, 1, encourage, 2, train, and 3, empower them to take this industry into the next generation, which is going to look wild. I mean, Jetsons, nothing.
Right.
It's going to get really intriguing. You've been involved on so many levels, but you've been working with the technicians, you've been working with the people who are coming into the industry as well as retiring out. What are your thoughts on the next generation and how we train them? Find them first. Well,
Finding is no different than it's been 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't put a lot of weight on the skies falling. Okay? For a number of reasons. When the overall unemployment is 2, 3, 4%, and we have a growth industry, we're standing in line with every other growth industry.
Amen.
Bragging for people, okay? So, and when unemployment is 6, 8, 10%, we get to pick and choose.
Yeah.
So the physical counting of technicians, I don't get too involved in.
Okay.
What I do get involved in is understanding the career path of aviation technicians, okay? And understand that when I was young, we were in the space race. Aviation was still special. You know, when you took a flight, that was to see grandma, that was
big deal.
Big deal.
Oh, you had to dress up, put your suit and tie on, a whole bit.
And now it's just another means of commuting.
Yeah.
And so the technology of flight.
Or a great place to start fights.
Yeah. The technology of flight doesn't terribly have that draw like it used to.
Okay.
The nice thing is that the new AAM community is ranking.
The AEA Educational Foundation silent auction will close in 15 minutes. Now is the time to get your bids on these great items. The silent auction closes in 15 minutes at 3 p.m. Thank you.
Time to launch the drone and bomb the hell out of Jeff.
So AAM is that new sexiness.
Okay.
Which is great.
It's going to be quite an attractant.
It is.
Good.
And I think when you flip that around a little bit, so we need the sexiness to draw. The other thing is that there's a big movement politically to move away from academia, that not everybody needs to go to college. Not everybody needs a master's degree in political science to be successful.
Darn good trade
and
school.
that trades are not a four-letter word,
Nope.
right? And so I think the more that happens, the more we get there. Now, part of the problem is that the career counselors, the school counselors, can't spell aviation.
No.
Okay? They've never been exposed to it generally,
No.
and so they don't truly understand it, so they can't counsel to it. Programs like AOPA and Gamma and NBAA, where they're reaching out to elementary and middle schools more, helps all of us, right? But I think the big thing is that thing in front of you is really the key.
Yeah.
Because the legacy classroom training environment is being rapidly replaced with just-in-time learning and just-in-time capabilities. Now, fast forward to AEA, what are we doing? We work very closely with ASTM on technician standards. And then I take those technician standards and petition the agency for acceptance of those in meeting regulatory requirements.
Okay.
So 2 years ago, we've had for a long time the NCAT and the Aviation Electronics Technician, AET, and then we have a number of endorsements. I petitioned the agency, AEA petitioned the agency to accept AET plus one of the endorsements as an acceptable means of compliance to the training requirements for repairmen. So if you look at the regs,
It seems to have turned out well, Rick.
it's
Instant segue.
well, it's the rule says 18 months
Yeah.
or training.
Training.
And so we said, hey, this AET is so robust, it's the equivalent of clepping out of a class.
Yeah. Well, you guys have worked really hard on this.
Well, and so the bottom line is that we won it.
Yep.
FAA said yes. So all of the AET folks are eligible to be repairmen without any other defense. At this function, 2 days ago,
Right.
the FAA,
Which you can read on Aero-News, by the way, shameless plug.
which you can read on Aero News, shameless plug,
Thank you, sir.
and Avionics News.
Very
and,
shameless plug.
Shameless plug. But the FAA awarded us our approval or acceptance
It was a hell of a move, by the way. Congratulations.
for our apprentice program. We worked for multiple years to develop an apprentice program in conjunction with the Department of Labor. So it's a Department of Labor approved apprentice program. What people don't realize is that opens up a lot of state funding for the small businesses who are running apprentices. So you get tax breaks, you get, in some cases, grants. There's a lot of opportunity at the state
yes.
level.
Keep
Okay?
going, yeah, there you go.
And then on top of that, now with the FAA's acceptance of it, you automatically move into a repairman certificate. Now, the third leg to that three-legged stool is we have a new rulemaking activity in Washington where we're looking at the portability of repairman certificates.
Oh boy.
Okay?
Yep.
Still have to work for a repair station. You still have all the regulatory basis. But, you know, once the administrator gives you a repairman certificate, you get to take that repairman certificate with you to your next employer. And that's going to be basically those 3 tiers of being able to really support the next generation workforce.
Wow.
So, and then we partner with organizations here at the show. Next Op is one of the booths over here. I don't know if you've got a chance to talk to them. They work with employers and do veteran placement, but they work primarily with employers. And so we have them meeting with the AEA member companies here, looking at what they're looking for. Most of AEA and most of the technicians and certainly most of the owners have at least some tie to veterans. Either we are a veteran or somebody close to us. And so they're able to basically take what we've already done for years, bring it around and move it. And so we're looking at you know, career enhancement from literally working with those that are working with the elementary schools, through the apprentice programs, the placement programs, and then finally the veteran placement to bring them into the industry. So we're touching all the bases.
I'll be darned. And I'll tell you what, that was a tight 20 minutes, man. Boy, if I give you another 20, can you keep... Rick, I got to tell you, it's always fun to talk to you, especially since we bust your chops so much and you take it and then you give it back to us and then we really feel foolish. But you've done such a phenomenal job in interpreting the puzzle palaces in Washington and bringing it to not just the AEA community, but aviation at large, and we thank you much for that. You've been one of our favorite interviews all along the way because it's always the serious, cool, interesting, nitty-gritty stuff. If you could explain to people your overall function with AEA so that when they call the organization, they know why you do what you do and, more important, why they need to talk to you.
Okay. Well, I handle regulatory affairs is the short answer.
Yes.
Basically, my role in Washington...
Which, by the way, should be regulatory shenanigans if it's properly...
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, there you go.
But myself and my team, because I do have a team that works with me, we handle regulatory affairs in the 5 domains that the majority of our membership reside in. Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and then obviously US. And so I view myself as being an active member of our members' quality team, our compliance team.
Okay.
So when they have a question about regulations, they want to know, where can I find an advisory circular? Is there a regulation that applies to installing a widget? You know, I help with that. When we find elements out there, I bring it back into the industry and I leverage the industry to find answers, to solve problems, to correct oversights. And so it's a two-way street. I work with the FAA to improve safety downstream, and I work with the membership to improve safety in the upstream. And then I spend about 25% of my time in straight advocacy, where I'm participating in rulemaking. I'm a co-chair of the 145 ARAC. I hope to be participating in the repairman ARAC shortly. A lot of committees, a lot of communities, and basically if something new is coming out, it's my job to at least be aware of it.
Pointy end of the spear, buddy.
That's it.
Rick, as always, appreciate
Pleasure.
everything.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 64th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Dallas, Texas, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.